All right. Hey y'all, coming to you from Jacksonville, Florida. This is GovLove, a podcast about local government, brought to you by engaging local government leaders. I'm Ben Kittelson, Senior Consultant at Ref Tellist and GovLove co-host. We have a great episode for you today. We're talking managing Palm Coast. But first, the best way to support GovLove is to become an engaging local government leaders member. The LGL is a professional association engaging the brightest minds in local government. And mark your calendars, our annual conference is coming up this fall, October 13th and 14th in Phoenix, Arizona. You can learn more and register for the conference by going to elgl.org/elgl22. Now, let me introduce today's guest. Denise Bevan is the city manager of the city of Palm Coast, Florida, a position she has been in since 2021, when she was named interim and was named the permanent city manager as of February 2022. She's been working for the city since 2007 as an environmental planner and then as city administration coordinator and chief of staff of infrastructure. So we're super excited to have Denise on. Welcome to GovLove. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This is pretty exciting. Glad to be here.
Cool. And as you know, as a GovLove listener, one of the ways we start our interviews is with a lightning round. So my first question for you, what was the first album that you bought?
I really had to think about this. Hysteria by Def Leppard.
Oh, nice. Does that ever get, mixed back into the rotation today? Or
It actually does. I'll have to share. I'm looking forward to seeing them very soon in concert.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. So the next question for you, what book are you reading?
The Art of the Long View by Peter Schwartz.
Cool. Very cool. All right. And then what was the last movie you saw in theaters or streamed?
So the last movie I saw, and I'll say I streamed it, was a very fun movie, Sing 2.
Oh, the animated one, right? Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Did it live up to the original?
By my opinion, yes. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Awesome. And then my last lightning round question for you. Where do you go for inspiration?
So here in Palm Coast, we have an extensive network of trails, and I have a favorite trail segment that I like to do, and it's beautiful. You see lots of nature, you see familiar faces. So I would say our trail network here in Palm Coast.
Awesome. And a nice little plug for your community. Great.
Hey, we have beautiful trails. It's definitely where I get my inspiration.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, on that note, one of the things I always like to ask folks is their path to local government. So, I mentioned some of your stops along the way at Palm Coast to your job today, but how did you end up in this field? How did you end up working in local government and at the city of Palm Coast?
Sure. So my passion has always been about the environment, natural resources, flora, fauna. And when I graduated college in ecology with a minor in English, I was looking to, work in the park industry or work for government. And at the time, those doors weren't opening as quickly as the private sector. And that was what I chose to do. I'm very excited to say that I got an opportunity to join a small environmental consulting firm. Mm-hmm. And really did a lot of exciting work regarding the environment, wetland delineation, so many different things. And our firm would have what I call territories. We would have one senior project manager work in one part of the state and another in another part of the state. And one of my territories, if you want to call it that, mm-hmm. is Flagler and St. Johns County. So Palm Coast is located in Flagler County, and St. Johns County is just north of us. And as I was performing these services for our clients, I really got to know Palm Coast really, really well, and helping with some of the permitting and regulatory oversight in Palm Coast, I just really started to fall in love with and grew a relationship with a lot of the developers and local governments here in Flagler County. And I wouldn't say I was pursuing local government, the opportunity to join Palm Coast in 2007, just, I guess you would say the stars aligned. That's when the recession really started to take place, and they were looking for an environmental planner. And I was grateful to be able to have an opportunity to make a difference with local government at that time. And as a recession was taking place, the private sector started to slow down for development and some of those services. So that's what got me here at Palm Coast.
Yeah. And was there something that you worked on, or maybe it was similar to the work you're already doing as a consultant, but was there something you worked on in that first job that you're like, oh, I made the right choice, I'm going to stick with this?
Oh, I do have a couple of those memories. One is that I had, as many of environmental consultants do, have a good relationship with regulatory agencies and consulting agencies, and those are U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Water Management District, those that know Florida regulatory oversight. And we were having a meeting about a project, and I knew the contacts to assist, just to answer some questions. And a lot of the team was surprised that I was able to answer those questions so quick. Mm-hmm. And I felt as if I'm not only a consultant for the city of Palm Coast, but also a professional asset that came on board with some information that could help not only our organization, but our stakeholders out there that are developers and, people trying to start a business, things of that nature. So I knew immediately I had an opportunity to make a difference here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before we I ask you about some of the work you did as an environmental planner and floodplain manager, can you tell our listeners a little bit about Palm Coast? Because it's kind of got a unique, maybe unique, but it's a very Florida background, I would say. And so can you tell us a little about Palm Coast?
Sure. So two fun facts. So Palm Coast actually doesn't have a physical coast. Our municipal boundaries only extend halfway through the intracoastal. So we do not actually have beachfront in our boundaries, but we have a beautiful intracoastal waterway, and we're very close to the beach. And the second fun fact is along Interstate 95, we're actually the closest exit to the beach from Miami to Maine. Oh. You can get to the beach quickest by using our exit off of 95.
That's a good fun fact.
Our history is pretty unique. I like to say we're a young city with old bones because we actually date back as a master plan community to the 60s and 70s. ITT, which is International Telephone and Telegraph Corporation, they actually began a venture in the late 60s and investing in our community. And the man in charge of is that master plan development, which is now Palm Coast, was Levitt & Sons, Dr. Norman Young. So we were planned very well, and actually were the study of many urban planning research through some institutions. So our leadership was through ITT for many years, and they were they served as the code enforcement. They served as, the master HOA, I guess you would say. And then at some point they did leave, ITT, Levitt & Sons, they did leave. And we were in a strange situation where we didn't have really the services coming that were demanded from the residents of Palm Coast. And so we had some, I guess you would say, forefathers that said, well, we need to become an incorporated city. And so we incorporated December 31st, 1999, but we've been around since the 60s and 70s. So young city, but old bones. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting having, I moved to Florida, I guess it's been a little over 3 years ago. But learning about communities like Palm Coast that were kind of master planned, and and there's some that are less successful than others in terms of like actually implementing that plan. But it's fascinating to learn about kind of those places that there was swampland before, right? And now it's this kind of city in the middle of in this beautiful area now. So it's kind of it's I don't know. It's a very Florida story that like we turn these swamps into this like beautiful community.
Yeah, and that was one of the most impressive parts of at the time. And you're talking before the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, and their master planning for our stormwater system actually integrates some of those natural conveyance creeks and swamps as part of the stormwater function. It's really impressive when you think about it. I mean, we have 70 miles of saltwater canals.
Wow.
And we're a system of swales, ditches, canals, and then the saltwater canals to the intercoastal. It's a really impressive system. Yeah.
Well, that is probably why they needed a environmental planner and eventually a floodplain manager for a town of your size. So, so what were some of the things? What were you working on like the management of that kind of infrastructure? Or what were some of the things you worked on early in your career at Palm Coast?
Sure. I'll start with on the environmental planner side. So when I came on board, growth was slowing down. And at the time, administration saw a need of working on special projects across the organization, and a team approach was established. So you would have cross sections of employees working on projects. And we had a green team that worked on sustainability initiatives. I was on that team. There was also special projects that we could be innovative in from a natural resource side. And that was an area where we integrated a GIS analysis, so a mapping effort of seeing what type of habitat we had citywide, and put in a proactive notification process for if we had a single family resident property that was vacant and it was going to be improved. It was proactively flagged if it had the right habitat to protect gopher tortoise. So there was, things like that I was able to work on from a team to my primary role. In 2007, the city, when I came on board, was February 2007, city offered me an opportunity to get my certified floodplain management certification. And so I took that. And that was a huge part of my daily regulatory oversight of projects and making sure it adhered to our floodplain regulations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you spent most of your career at just Palm Coast, but how different is like floodplain management in a place like Palm Coast where you have 70 miles of canal versus maybe a city that doesn't have quite the same exposure to canals and waterways?
Yeah, it really goes to the maintenance of that whole network. So from a floodplain management perspective, you want to ensure that you have a sustainable stormwater management program. My role was regulatory in nature, and the challenge is most of our city, which is not coastally influenced, which means a named storm, a hurricane, and that coastal influence, most of our city hasn't been thoroughly mapped by FEMA. So looking at a guess versus a thorough study, and that's kind of unique, having that blend with a mature managed stormwater system to a different type of flood risk on the other part of your city. Yeah.
And are those like canals, like, is it like streets almost that you have to maintain, or like it's city right away kind of thing? Or is it like people, like, is it the responsibility of the property owner to maintain those kind of, like, make sure they're not collapsing or flooding nearby properties?
Yeah, we do have regulations to ensure that there's not sediment erosion, that, many of the seawalls along the saltwater canals are are from original construction. So when ITT was developing Palm Coast, they wanted the canal systems to come online first. So that's the oldest part of our city.
Wow.
So some of those seawalls are no longer optimal, right? Some are failing, and we do have regulations to assist in that. When you mentioned about the maintenance of our saltwater canals, we do have what we note as weir structures. They're, the little dams, right, to help regulate flow through the system. And we have had a weir blowout, and we would have to, of course, do an emergency repair of that.
Oh, wow.
So it's interesting, the nature of dealing with that dynamic and making sure that we're protecting our residents. As dynamic as it is, we do have some protections in place, at least from our side of the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like almost like another function of the public works department, that maintaining canals and dams and seawalls and stuff. That's really cool. So, you mentioned some of the work, you worked on early in your career, but I'm just curious, like, as cities are starting to deal with or plan for climate change and climate adaptation, how has, Palm Coast, approached that? Like, has there been kind of any effort to be like, if we're going to have to deal with, more intense storms, higher sea levels, or king tides, like, what does it look like in Palm Coast?
Well, I can give a little bit of history on how we got here, and I'll answer your question with how we're approaching it today. We had, you may recall, now time has passed, we had Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Matthew that we received storm bans from. It wasn't a direct impact, but they were back-to-back storms in a 12-month period. And it did overwhelm our system in a couple of ways. We did have, flooding in the streets. We did have some events of flooding in homes. And our city council took note of that. And we, through a lot of preparation and guidance to assist council, we have a stormwater utility fee. So we didn't have that revenue prior to those events.
Oh, wow.
So we were maintaining the stormwater program and the infrastructure, but we weren't able to add capacity, look at opportunities to improve the function through capital projects. And that action from council gave us that ability to have more of an advanced, aggressive program, because you're talking a system that was constructed in the late 60s, early 70s, and we're here 50 years later, and it functions differently with the development and all those other things that increases pressures on top of a storm impact. So we've utilized some advanced modeling to prioritize stormwater improvements in the city. And that's very progressive. But when you talk about climate change and sea level rise, we haven't established a policy, a resiliency plan, or anything like that. But as of today, we're working closely with our neighboring jurisdictions, including Flagler County, on a comprehensive approach of looking at sea level rise, climate change, and resiliency. That's happening right now.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, we'll have to have you back once you guys work out your approach. That's cool. It just fascinates me because, Florida is obviously, I think, going to be at the front lines of that as, sea levels rise and climate and storms intensify. So it's really cool to hear about, what local governments are trying to do. So, I think I mentioned this in your bio, but you had a kind of an interesting job title for a while, Chief of Staff of Infrastructure. So I just wanted to know what was kind of what did you work on as a Chief of Staff of Infrastructure, and what does that job entail?
Well, it was a very short time position. Basically, the previous administration, the previous city manager, saw an opportunity to grow within the organization, leadership and mentorship. And he created a chief of staff of infrastructure and a chief of staff of citizens engagement. And those were positions that reflect the departments that we would work with. And so infrastructure was stormwater engineering, obviously IT, utility, and some of those areas that are critical dependent departments for the organization, and working with them in a coordinator role, and working through some of the challenges that they may be having with exponential growth and the challenges of maintaining level of service, communication, collaboration. Those were the mission, the vision of previous administration with those roles.
Oh, fascinating. Cool. So it's almost like an assistant city manager or something, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. It was kind of a assistant city manager in training. Maybe that's a way to look at it too.
Cool. Well, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but in our previous question, but what are some of the infrastructure challenges in Palm Coast? And I imagine, a city that was primarily built out in, the 60s and 70s, some of that infrastructure is probably coming due for replacement or rehabilitation. So what are some of those kind of challenges that y'all are working through?
Yeah, I don't think they're unique to Palm Coast in a lot of ways, but speaking to the age of our infrastructure, I said at the beginning, young city, old bones.
Yeah.
With, we're blessed with a utility department that originally was a different entity and was acquired by the city of Palm Coast. And we have 3 water treatment plants, 2 wastewater treatment plants, and they are always challenging the opportunity to become innovative. And so the challenges of one area is to keep as much water in our system as possible. So we don't ever want to lose water just by a waste stream or just our normal processes. So one of the challenges that we're actually really proud of is how those plants function through reuse and wet weather discharge. And we don't let too much water go. It's either repurposed, replenished in a rapid infiltration basin. We as a utility do not like to waste water, and that's not part of our mission or vision. But water is one of those areas that's a challenge. And then the treatment process, as inflation continues to increase, the cost of chemicals, the cost of fuel, all those compound as factors. And the last thing for at least the utility is, I think this is another very unique area to Palm Coast, is that we have what are called Pep tanks. So they're pre-effluent tanks. So they're for wastewater. And they're little capsules that collect wastewater from homes and then pump it through our system. And we have one of the largest Pep System programs and area in the state of Florida. So that's pretty unique to us. And then obviously you have pipes in the ground that have to be maintained, and those are on programs. And that's not unique to our city. That's many places that has utilities and those level of services. Yeah,
definitely. So is the Pep system kind of like lift stations, or is it are there more, is it smaller than that, or I haven't heard of that.
It's the PEP, PEP is pre-treatment effluent pumping. So what that does is it collects central sewage from a home, and the tank is actually submerged in the yard, and it collects and then pumps out of the tank into the actual infrastructure of the wastewater. And so it goes to a lift station process. So these are the areas that we have challenge with gravity, right? It's very flat, so you don't have gravity working for you. So you actually have to push the sewage out through the system from the home out. And if you don't have power to the home, then that causes a problem. And in a couple of ways, power to the home and power to the system. So when we had the back-to-back storms, people were still flushing, but we were out of power. And so that caused a problem in the homes. So that's an ongoing challenge for our city.
Fascinating. Well, that was a great deep dive on sewer infrastructure. People come to GovLove for the leadership tips, and they stay for deep dives and the nitty gritty of utilities, I think. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about was kind of your time as interim city manager and kind of what that transition was like. So I guess I don't know if the best way to get into this, but I'm just curious about kind of that step into the interim role and maybe what you worked on as like initiatives or priorities during that time, and then let's start there, and then we can talk about the transition to the permanent job.
Sure. So I was appointed interim city manager June 1st and became effective June 2nd. At the same time, City Council asked for our fire chief to act as assistant city manager as an interim as well. So that was a lot of change at a particular place in our budget process, right? Yeah. It's June. For government, you're really at the peak of getting your budget tailored and delivered to your city council. So that was one of my first forefront thoughts were, okay, we got to focus on the budget and make sure that it keeps steaming ahead and it's done well. And then the counterpart of what I made as a priority is to make sure that whoever was appointed permanent city manager, they came in with as much information that could help them be onboarded as quickly as possible. And so what I started with each department is to create a 5-year plan for each department that would talk about their vision, their mission, what their challenges are, what successes they had, what they see from 5 years out. And those were going to be deliverables to the permanent city manager. So they would have a lot of information at their fingertips to get them going as quickly as possible. So that was budget and setting up the next city manager for success was my two big priorities as interim.
Yeah. So that was almost like a strategic planning process then for each of the departments. Was that something they just kind of did on their own, or were you kind of involved in that to help them kind of help guide them? Or
yeah, it was my direction to have that happen. And you said it perfectly. It was a strategic planning exercise. We did a summit. All the directors, all the leadership went away from their offices, and we actually worked on that and said, this is what you see 5 years down the road. These are your resource needs. These are your challenges today. And all of the leadership worked together and heard everybody's plans. And then the reports and products were finalized. So exactly, strategic planning, but it wasn't done in a silo. Each department did their own thing. They collaborated and shared ideas.
Yeah. Any surprises or even themes that came out of that you can share?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it surprises because local government always works very conservatively. When you talk about adding positions or making structural changes, they're not done, on a whim. There's very much a methodology to that. So one of the things that I saw was a lot of thoughtfulness on that structure and that growth and that conservative approach. And that was appreciated. One of the things that I enjoyed the most is how the different departments saw empowering their employees. What does their mission mean to them? What do they see that they could do to help their employees? And that was exciting because we want to retain our talent. So the departments each had a very thoughtful and meaningful way to do that was tailored to their areas of expertise.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. Any examples that stand out as this was a cool or interesting way for a department to work on retention?
So it became an idea that started in one department, and it is now implemented across all departments, and we call those career roadmaps.
Cool. Yeah.
So every position in the organization has somewhere to grow. So if you come in on day one and you don't know the city of Palm Coast, you don't know where you want to go in your career, you may want to work for utility one day and you start in public works. Every position has an ability to say, okay, I need these certifications, I need this training, and I can get here if I do A, B, C, and D. And you can do that up, you can do that laterally. And so you basically have a syllabus of how you can navigate the organization through career advancement. So that's something we're very proud of. It's also went into our evaluation process. We have we call it the Light Team Leadership Intern Training Experience that staff work directly with the city manager on special projects. And the Light Team last year volunteered. They wanted to do an overhaul of our employee evaluation process. And they wanted more coaching sessions, more one-on-ones with their supervisors so they can have touch points to talk about their successes or where they're having challenges. And a team put that together, and that's in place now. So that career roadmap is complemented with these coaching touch points in the evaluation process now.
That's really cool. So I have to ask about the Light Team now. So yeah, I already forgot the acronym, but so who's on that, and like how does that work? And yeah.
Yeah, so the Leadership Intern Training Experience, it was established 10 years ago by the previous administration. And fun fact, myself and I reference our fire chief, we were both on the inaugural Light Team, working with the city manager. And so there's been roughly 10 years of graduates that have participated in that. And right now, we are recruiting our next class from across the organization, and they're going to start roughly August, on the next suite of projects. So we want to make sure that they have the bandwidth to be able to work on something that's not anywhere in their wheelhouse and enjoy experiences that they normally won't, but it really is about growing our future leadership. These are the employees that want to grow, and they want to grow as leaders, and they don't mind doing some extra activities and getting key moments with the city manager's office.
That's so cool. So, if a city wanted to steal your idea and do it in their organization, how do you identify the folks that participate, and what are maybe some other examples of projects that they get to work on?
Sure. I would be excited if someone picked up this idea. I really would. So identifying employees. So it goes a welcome email, mass email goes out citywide, and any employee that is, there's standards, right? They have to be salary, and there's some other provisions to that, but they can go to their direct supervisor and ask if they can participate, knowing the projects that they would work on. And then the director actually provides them a letter of support. So you know that it's been embraced through the department. They have the flexibility to participate. And then they go through an interview process, and it's not through the city manager's office, but the previous previous year's Light Team interviews them. And so the Light Team comes with a recommendation of who they think should be on the Light Team. And they present that to our executive team, which is all of our directors, assistant city manager, of course, myself. And so it comes from within the organization. It's not pull a name from the hat. It's got a very thoughtful process. And it's not, I like to do this and okay, I'm in. They actually had to interview for it.
Very cool. And are there other examples besides the rethinking the performance evaluation system of projects I get to work on?
Yeah, Absolutely. So I'll give you an example of the one that I worked on.
Mm-hmm.
Was I actually applied to work on a project that was focused on environmental stewardship and planning, urban planning. And I did not get that one.
You're like, that's too close to her regular job. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So no, I didn't get that one. And I got strategic planning and the 5-year progress report. Mm. And fire chief got performance measures. And so interesting enough, in that light team, we established a new way of doing strategic planning for our organization that we still use today. So the projects are always organizational wide. They touch lots of different areas in the organization, and they're a cross section of employees. So from people in the field to people in the office, want to make sure we get that collaboration, that experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And I assume that's got that kind of a program like that helps both with, developing your staff and also probably retaining them and advancing them through their career, right? So like the folks that go through that, do they tend to stay with the organization?
I really haven't did a complete inventory, but I can tell you that our fire chief has it, and he's retiring October 14th. And the next in command was on the light team. Mm-hmm. Our assistant city manager was on the light team. Director of IT was on the light team. So there's many people that have succeeded through the organization, but it's not a pass. It's not that, I was on the light team, so I'm going to go jump up the ladder. But you definitely see that worth is instilled, and that motivation to continue to grow because of that experience, I believe, is there.
Cool. Very cool. All right. So to switch gears back to kind of your transition. So when you kind of were named, well, actually, first I want to ask, I think I read when I was doing research, for our talk today, that originally you didn't apply for the permanent city manager job. So what was what led you to be like, I want to do this. I think I could do it on a permanent basis rather than just an interim.
Well, what I've said in the past is it's the journey, right? Mm. I consider the interim role as an opportunity for me to learn more about this position. What does it entail? But also the relationships that would be important to that position of working with city council, working with community stakeholders, have a wonderful relationship across the whole county with the county administrator, the other city managers. There's just so much collaboration, and that really was instilled over time, and realized, okay, this is a really great opportunity. This is something special. And that journey and that experience of working through different items in interim really made an impression on me. But I have to share something that our now assistant city manager, she asked me, she says, "Denise, are you going to apply?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm not there yet. I'm just not there yet." And she says, "You can do this. You can do this. You'll be great at it." And so I don't know. And so I had quite a few cheerleaders, including my family, that got me to where I told myself, this is something I want to do. This is my time, and I'm excited about this. So I went through a little bit of phases from the time of that interim appointment to obviously today, which is only about a year ago.
Yeah. No, I think I'm always curious to learn more about that, because I think from the outside it seems like, people apply it's like a normal job, you just apply for it, but there is some learning about what it takes, and then thinking, believing in yourself enough to do it, right? And I don't know, for those of us that haven't taken the leap into a management job like that, it's interesting to learn about the thought process and what it takes to get yourself ready or feel that you're ready.
Yeah, agreed. From believing in yourself is one thing, but having other people believe in you is really the most powerful part of that.
Yeah. So now that you're kind of in the seat on, a permanent basis, what are some of the things that you were like, these are the initiatives I want to do kind of in my first, few months, year on the job? Like, how did you kind of identify what those are? And it sounds like you set yourself up well with some of these roadmaps that you had departments set up, though.
I guess, looking back at that, it's interesting. But I really want at the forefront focus inward on our organization with all the change that went through, especially the change of my appointment. I wanted to kind of instill some cultural infusion with making sure our employees knew there was a plan, that their value was paramount, and that they're our most important resource. So making sure that was at the forefront of the transition was important, because it hasn't been there with some of the recent history in the last couple of years, and that's just naturally change. It's nothing unique, but that was my highest priority, was making sure our organization felt the calm and knew that there was a plan, and also succession planning. As being a city that has been here for a while, we have just amazing institutional knowledge that they're going to be able to enjoy the next phase of their life and retire. And that could be 5 years out, 7 years out, 10 years out. And that was really important for me to start a structure of, okay, who's the next in line? We want to grow our talent, make sure that we're ready for that transference of knowledge. It doesn't happen as a switch. There's a overlap to making sure that knowledge is shared, and making sure that we're prepared for some of those retirements that were going to be pretty significant in the 1 to 3 year range. So a huge focus internally on the organization, and making sure that the team idea and the concept was infused throughout the whole organization. That was the initial one, to make sure that we were all on board throughout the organization and the departments to make that a focus.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how do you make that actionable? I guess I want to, because I think probably every leader wants to engage their employees and make them feel valued and welcomed. And then, but what does it take to actually do that, or what was your approach? I guess to is it just being out there more? Is it finding ways to hear employees, or how did you guys approach that?
Yeah, it's many different aspects to your point. So I've been with the City of Palm Coast 15 years, and I'm lucky to be able to know so many parts of the organization. One of the first actions was to go to each department, and Mayor Alphen is our mayor, and we actually would go to each department together and hear exactly what they had to say. And that was, every employee had an opportunity to speak frustration, applaud, ask, what's happening with this. And that was a complete opportunity to hear all through our organization. And our directors are amazing. We have an amazing team of directors. I can't say that enough. And their investment is important too, right? So they are leaders within their departments, and then they have their team that focuses on these areas. So they're hearing it top down, bottom up, and we're not shy of criticism. Criticism's good. That's important. So that was one area. And we've done organizational surveys. We've done some very creative things in some departments, including City Hall here in the administration office. We always have an active puzzle going on. So you actually, when you come in and you're waiting to have a meeting, you get to work on the puzzle. And so that's a fun team building exercise. And we've actually figured some really challenging things out by just working on a puzzle. And I think Park and Park and Recreation does that. Public Works does that. It's amazing how those little reliefs can make a difference.
Yeah, very cool. And one other thing we wanted to talk with you about was it sounds like recently you guys kind of adopted some strategic priority areas, and one of them is about kind of growth for the community. So can you, what is kind of, that priority area for Palm Coast, and what are you guys planning to do?
Sure. So if you look at Palm Coast on a map, it could be deceiving. We are mostly located east of US 1. When you see development, that's where you see that master plan community framework. And that framework to the east was planned a lot for cars, right? Not a lot of pedestrian networks and thought processes there, but we've always been planned to go west of US 1. We have a significant area west of US 1. It's a blank canvas, and it's the future of Palm Coast. So we started with this podcast of talking about the history of Palm Coast, master plan, really well thought out, integrating natural systems, making sure areas are protected that made sense. Well, we're going into that new case study of growing west as well. And so one of City Council's priorities, one of their top priorities, I would say, is evaluating the western expansion of Palm Coast and making sure that we again become the model of smart growth. And so we're looking at, our major roadway networks that were built to go west from north to south, and there's 4 of them. And what makes sense, what's most feasible. And what we're focusing on today, more than the other expansions to the west, is our Matanzas Woods westward expansion. City Council, I can't applaud City Council more than with their vision and thinking so forward, is we have utility, stormwater, and engineering and public works in different campuses. Well, they told us that they like to see all in one campus. So we're actually in the advanced stages of a municipal operation complex. Cool. And so a larger complex for those services, and that will connect to our Matanzas Woods westward expansion. So a lot of things coming together precisely.
Very cool. And so, you kind of referenced the original development being more car focused. Is some of the focus on with that expansion westward to be pedestrian bike friendly, or is it, I guess what's the approach there?
Yeah, so it's the approach is green print before blueprint. So making sure that conservation corridors are at the forefront. So thinking about what the landscape is talking to, what can be complemented in a planning development standpoint. So it's interesting because you mentioned about Palm Coast, and there used to be swamps there, and now there's no swamps, and it's a reverse approach. It's the green print first versus where the road's going to go. So that's definitely pedestrian friendly. It's going to be a diversity of housing, diversity of different type of experiences, looking at really that being our future model of smart growth for not just Palm Coast, but the region. We're really excited about that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, and I imagine that might help with, I don't know if Palm Coast is, as a lot of places are dealing with the affordability and kind of pressures, but doing that kind of growth smartly in a way that either preserves or enhances affordability. I think that's got to be, I assume, part of the thought process too, right? Absolutely.
We like to use the word attainable housing, right? So different type of product, different type of approach, really thinking what's the next 30, 50 years looks like for Palm Coast.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. So if our listeners end up visiting, they'll have to seek out and see what you guys are doing.
They should. We're doing some pretty amazing things.
Very cool. All right. So, is there anything else that you're working on, like that our listeners should look out for in the next, you're in your first year on the job?
Well, you'll see, and this isn't just from me personally, but this is the merit and the care that's happening here in Flagler County. We're collaborating across boundaries. We're assisting each other, meaning how can we help with learning more about your challenges. I mentioned before the countywide resiliency approach, and water doesn't stop at boundaries. So we have those active collaborations and working on things that don't work in silos. We try to make Flagler County the best it can be, not just the city of Palm Coast.
Very cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, the traditional last question on GovLove is usually the hardest one, but so if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as the exit music for this episode?
Oh goodness. I guess it's an old favorite from my family, and it always brings a smile to my face. Sitting on the Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding.
Awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. I'm sure there are lots of docks you could sit on in Palm Coast.
We have a few.
Awesome. Well, that ends our episode for today. Denise, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me and sharing, all about your career and the work you guys are doing in Palm Coast.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Again, thank you for the opportunity. It's great to share our story.
Yeah. And for our listeners, GovLove is brought to you by engaging local government leaders, and the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGL member. You can reach us online at elgl.org/GovLove or on Twitter at the handle @GovLovePodcast. And ELGL's annual conference is coming up this fall, October 13th and 14th in Phoenix, Arizona. Learn more and register by going to elgl.org/ELGL22. You should also subscribe to GovLove on your favorite podcast app. And if you're already subscribed, go tell a friend or colleague about this podcast. Help us spread the word that GovLove is the go-to place for local government stories. And with that, thank you for listening. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.
I'm sitting on a dock of a bay, wasting time. Look like nothing's gonna change. Everything still remains the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do, so I guess I'll remain the same. Sitting here resting my bones, and this loneliness won't